let's get started. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Phil Sharon. I facilitate a lot of the webinars here for Think Company, but I'm not one of the presenters. We'll get started. So first off, if you haven't heard of us before, we are Think Company. We're a UX and technology firm. We have locations in Philadelphia and Denver, Colorado, and we help our clients achieve their business goals by improving the digital experiences for their customers and their employees. We are co-presenting today with Seer Interactive, and if you haven't heard of Seer, they're a digital marketing agency founded in 2002. Seer works with clients to integrate SEO, paid media, and analytics data with industry trends and audience intelligence to make customer journey optimizations otherwise not possible in silos. They have a strong focus on translating complex data sets into actionable business intelligence. Seer also helps clients drive ROI and improve online user experiences. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists. First, we have Sun Quan Bush, who's a senior experience designer at Think Company. Sun Quan tackles a variety of roles at Think Company, including qualitative and quantitative research, information architecture, workflow analysis, data visualization, and rapid iteration prototyping. His eye for fine detail allows him to make connections between scattered interdependent issues to understand the depth and breadth of problems he seeks to solve for his clients. In recent years, Sun Quan has worked extensively on maintaining a measurement strategy for a pharmaceutical company, learning how to make the most of the analytics available to his team to glean insights. Sharon Lunny is the SEO lead at Seer Interactive. She works with various industries, including finance, e-commerce, SaaS, to increase her clients' organic visibility and grow their business. With a passion for audience research and data-backed insights, Sharon enjoys leveraging qualitative and quantitative research to understand user needs and develop tailored content strategies for the companies she works with. And finally, we have Denise Baginski, Senior Creative Manager at Seer Interactive. With a love for data-driven design and problem solving, Denise helps bridge gaps between search data and user experience. As a Senior Creative Manager at Seer Interactive, Denise enjoys collaborating with her SEO and paid media teammates to create digital assets for clients across a wide variety of industries. Her background in visual and UX design helps her leverage quantitative and qualitative insights to design experiences that answer the questions and pain points for her clients customers are searching for. And that's all that I have to say. So I'm going to jump out of my screen share mode. I'm going to stop screen sharing altogether. And I'm going to hand off the reins over to, I believe it's Sharon that I'm giving it to. And I'll be back when we get to the Q&A session. Thank you, Sharon.
Thanks, Phil, for that introduction. Super excited to hop in today and talk to everyone here about the future of UX and SEO. So what brought us together today? As some of us may know, Google actually updates their algorithm about 500 to 600 times a year. And most of the time when these updates are pushed through, we don't realize until we see ranking fluctuations or we actually read a news article after the fact. But sometimes they do actually let us know in advance, and especially if the algorithm update that is rolling out is extremely important, which is why we are here today. So we're here to talk about Google's page experience update. Google recently announced that page experience will now be a ranking factor in search. This update is expected to roll out in May of 2021, and it will now assess the experience of a page by reviewing a combination of core web vitals and page experience signals. These include load time, content shifts, mobile friendliness, safe browsing, and non-intrusive interstitials. The great thing, however, about this update is that we've been given advance notice to prepare. And this gives us the time to address usability issues and improve overall experience in time for the rollout in May. So why is this important? Google wants to rank sites that are not only best resources for a user's query, but also provides the best experience. Ultimately, Google wants to make the web an enjoyable place and really just a better solution for everybody. What they're doing now is letting us know that now is the time to get in line with this goal. It is important to note, however, that this announcement should be definitely seen as a leading indicator that UX will be considered in future algorithm updates to come. And so what does this mean? As page experience and user experience become a larger ranking factor in SEO, it's easy to get wrapped up in the technical definitions of web vitals, page speed, and experience signals. So we kind of wanted to anchor ourselves in a common understanding of how SEO and UX teams can work together towards the same goal. So when we're thinking about page experience on a site, the first thing we need to understand is your audience intent and the goal of the user. Those insights should be leveraged to create content that is easily accessible and provides a great experience overall. And ideally, that content and experience exists on a site that loads regardless of what device the user is on. So how can SEO and UX work together? In order to set your site up for success, it'll be important to start building processes and identifying how to get your SEO and UX teams to break down silos and work together. One of the main things we can do is create a mutual understanding of our users and our goals. This includes understanding our audience and their needs, understanding what challenge and roadblocks exist and how to overcome them, and also identifying how we can work cross-divisionally to create a better experience for our users. I'll pass this over to Denise to walk through what this intersection actually looks like in practice.
Awesome, thanks, Sharon. So what does this intersection of SEO and UX actually look like? So when we approach digital as individual teams, we are the experts. Responsibilities on the SEO side typically include things like benchmarking and a ton of research, including audience, keyword, and competitive research. So SEOs use their research to better understand the person behind the search and also the user search intent in order to inform a content and optimization strategy. Analytics and measurement can also help determine success and inform future optimizations. On the UX side, designers go through a similar process, starting with goal setting before moving into research and discovery. So this could include things like audience research, user interviews, competitor research, and UX designers will use all of this research to better understand the user and inform a content and structural strategy for wireframing before moving into visual design and development handoff. Analytics and measurement, as well as additional user testing, can help determine success and also inform future optimization. So they both sound pretty similar, right? So where are the overlaps? What happens when you merge these two? Well, you get this really cool intersection point where our approaches to digital overlap, and it overlaps a lot. So it's here at this intersection point that knowledge sharing and collaboration can really be the key to better understanding our users' needs. So as individual teams, we are the experts, but as an integrated team, we can provide an even better digital experience. So let's take a closer look at that overlap. There are three main areas where knowledge sharing can lead to a better digital experience. The first one is research and discovery. So coming up with a research plan that leverages the strengths of both your SEOs and UX designers can help facilitate deeper and more connected insights and can also diversify perspectives. So at this intersection, looked at things like audience research, user interviews, keyword research, and competitor research. Each team can bring different things to the table in order to create that shared understanding of user needs. Thought tools like empathy mapping can help distill the research and data into an organized structure that maps out the tasks, feelings, influences, and pain points that your user might be feeling while they're trying to achieve their goal. So not only does the shared understanding help support and inform design and content decisions, but it can also help prime your stakeholders and your decision makers for approvals down the road. The second area of intersection here is with your content strategy. So this is where both teams really start connecting the dots between the research and data and the actual digital experience. So collaboration during this content strategy, content optimization, and wireframing can really help ensure that both teams are capturing search intent with an experience that actually meets user needs and just plain old makes sense. And finally, the third area is general usability. So these are things just to keep in mind throughout the entire process to help improve the user experience from both an SEO and UX perspective. So this include things like improving page scannability with SEO optimized headings, using alt text for images, and making sure that you're not including important concepts only within the images themselves in order to help with accessibility, ensuring that the page or asset is mobile responsive, making sure that your content answers your users' questions comprehensively. This can help with bounce rate, having your site follow safe browsing best practices and using HTTPS. And finally, looking to improve page speed with tactics like reducing image sizes and consolidating style sheets. So on paper, I'm sure that all sounds great, but we know that there are challenges that come with moving towards a more collaborative and cross-divisional workflow. So with that in mind, I will pass things over to Sun Quan.
Thanks, Denise. All right, so let's get into the challenges. So, there's lots of these different types of technical issues, a lot of strategies we can do, and we've kind of established a clear picture of what we want to do when it comes to working together between SEO and UX, but we know that there's also a lot of organizational and people challenges that often can get in the way. So moving on here, I'm sure for a lot of you folks, depending on where you've worked, you've all been through some version of this, but just to give you a picture of how silos can lead to breakdown and churn, you can just imagine for a second, you're trying to get this website out the door, this design, and it might go something like this, especially if you're handing things off step by step. UX creates a mock-up that ends up being, too heavy once it goes into development. SEO, wasn't consulted, and they have to scramble and kind of fit in their SEO strategy to fit whatever approved designs have already been signed off. And then development codes the site with, not enough time or budget, so they don't really think about analytics compatibility. They just need to get something out the door. And then the analytics team comes in, and they don't have enough of a setup to be able to actually, set analytics up efficiently. So they don't really have a great measurement system in place at launch, and that kind of delays being able to see how you did. And then all of a sudden, legal comes in, which I deal with a lot in pharma, of course, but suddenly, you're required to have this modal design to accept cookies or to deal with like privacy compliance. And then you have to just kind of staple that in somewhere. And then the end result is a site that has accessibility issues, lower page rank, with a lot of last minute fixes and duct tape here and there to get it out the door, right? And this big intrusive modal that comes in because legal said you had to have it or something like that. So, that's the picture, right? I'm sure some of you can relate to at least some of that aspect of this. But the ways that we can start to address this, focus on dealing with these three key obstacles. So you have communication breakdowns between teams, misaligned goals and KPIs, and unclear roles and responsibilities. So looking to address this first one here around communication. Here are some considerations here. There's a lot of material in this section, but we'll be sure to hand out the slides so y'all can look at some of these specific ideas and prompts. So that first question about communication breakdown, a lot of times the biggest challenge is you just don't have time, right? It's easier to just get your piece done, pass it along to the next person that needs to do it, and just make sure that you're using every last bit of your budget that you might have to just make sure that your piece is working at a minimum. But what we really need to do in order to achieve some of these more holistic goals, like making sure that the whole experience lines up well and SEO and UX are working tightly together, is you really need to loop people in early and loop them in often. So for example, the business stakeholders really need to be involved and bought in to make sure that you have that space to collaborate together. You actually have time set aside to meet early and make sure that you don't have, that your deadlines and your scope allow you to actually talk to these different groups ahead of time and invest that time, early so that you can avoid the churn later. Looking at SEO and UX design, for example, this is a great part where Denise had alluded to, you could really talk through with UX research and content strategy teams on audience research and align a lot of those common audience research goals with a lot of the usability research goals that UX research teams may come up with. Another opportunity here would be working with the analytics teams ahead of time. So especially when SEO, UX, and analytics all are aligned on what your goals are, what you're trying to measure, what really needs to be a priority, that makes a huge difference to make sure that development is prioritizing actually building the analytics or making sure that they're building in a way that keeps the analytics in mind. So that's all very crucial from a technology standpoint and a design standpoint, so that all of the goals that you need to measure are actually in place. And then, of course, depending on your industry, you may deal with this a lot more often or less frequently, but legal is another important party that you need to talk to early. You don't want any surprises, especially right before it's about to go out the door, to have to make a bunch of last-minute changes. So finding opportunities to bring them in early as you have concepts that you're about to bring into development. And then when you have close to a final product, can often help a lot, especially in pharma, for example. So moving on to the next challenge. So aligning on goals from the beginning. So another key area here to consider, there's some specific things that you can think about for each of these different organizations, depending on if you're in one of these groups in your company or you tend to work with this group. So with the business teams, the big thing you need to do is to kind of break this down. Why is it that we need to worry about this page experience algorithm? Tie it to how this affects their business goals. When it comes to the SEO team and the UX team, there's a lot of opportunity to collaborate more tightly to understand the types of content that you need, and also really kind of balance the what do you really need for this experience to land well and for your audience to meet their goals here. And that's a lot of times a bit of a push and pull, right? Between, do I really need this modal? Do I really need to have this extra animation here and there? Or, is it getting in the way, or is it enhancing the experience? Is it worth the added weight that it puts on the page, for example? Similarly, for analytics, you're going to have the same kind of questions around, there's tons of different tools you can use to measure the performance of a page, but is the insight you're collecting worth the extra weight that it might put on a page? Like a classic example is heat maps, which are really cool to see where people click, but you might be adding a lot of page load if you keep that on there all the time. And then, of course, you're getting into examples of legal. Oftentimes, the one that may be most broadly relevant to you all is the GDPR or CCPA requirements to have cookies up on your site, or the ability to accept cookies. In pharma, we definitely deal with lots of different, compliance questions as well. But accessibility is also a big one that's becoming more relevant to a lot more folks, and people are aware of the lawsuits that can come into play if you're not compliant on the page. So being able to bring people in that and keep them looped in around those compliance issues ahead of time really gives you a lot more time to address those issues early. And then, of course, for development, the key thing here is bringing them in often, in order to make sure that they have lead time to prioritize their backlogs, to make sure that what you have scoped out to build can be broken out into a clear roadmap, so that you know what you need to launch and have all of those requirements budgeted out so that they can build it. All right, so touching on what are, now that you have some idea of those different challenges or those expectations. When it comes to addressing the obstacle of roles and responsibilities, there are a lot of different tools that you may already have seen in the past with some of your organizations, but this is really a case where some tried and true tools and methods go a long way. So for example, classic one is the RACI matrix, where you can see, define who is responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed on each of these initiatives. So especially when you see something like on SE between SEO and UX, certain overlapping expectations, you can work with that specific team and make sure that they know, all right, well, we both do this type of research around the audience, but who's responsible for it, or who's kind of has the final say on how this content looks, for example. There's all these finer questions you can define with a RACI matrix to really clear up a lot of that ambiguity. Next up, you have the project brief. So this is more of that, the guiding light, the North Star, this is why we're building this site. These are the goals. And really to make sure that every team you loop in can quickly reference this project and what you're trying to do, especially if they're more on that like informed column, for example, where they may not really know what's going on until you've looped them in to just ask them a specific question, for example. And then of course, another classic thing to do is any sort of project management tool, especially if you do get to work more closely as a team, to be able to split out your, who's doing what. This might be more common on like a smaller, tighter team, or maybe SEO, analytics, and UX get to be, working on the same team. But it's of course very important too if you're working on a larger team with a lot of different folks as well. And finally, the other one here that's would be exciting, and we don't often get to do it as much as we might love to, is cross-training. So the more that, say, SEO folks understand the goals and what UX folks do, or SEO UX folks can understand how SEO teams work, the more you're able to anticipate when you should be bringing people in, where you might recognize like, hey, I don't know what to do here, but I know who I can talk to, and I know what questions I can ask to make sure that we get this right. So overall, the big takeaway here with a lot of this stuff is that the root of it is that you really shouldn't just have a handoff between SEO and UX and any of these other teams to development or analytics, for example. Keeping open lines of communication are really crucial to make sure that you can always reach out and kind of anticipate, and because you're not going to be able to predict every problem that comes up, but you want to be able to communicate and get these problems resolved early so that it's not just a scramble at the end and last minute surprise. So awesome. I'm going to, oh yeah, there we go. So we'll hand it off to Denise to talk through an approach and more of a summary here.
Awesome, thanks, Sunquan. So we looked at the intersection points, we looked at some challenges and how to overcome them. So let's take a look at what this new approach can actually look like. So at a high level, the workflow can look something like this. So definitely want to make sure that you're baking in periods for knowledge sharing and internal reviews at every major milestone, which can help facilitate that collaboration between both divisions and all the additional teams that would go into working on a project. So starting with the discovery phase, it's important to make sure that all teams are looped in from the very beginning while you're benchmarking and setting goals. So this can and probably should include more people just outside of SEO and UX. So think about your content writers, your developers, and any additional project stakeholders or decision makers. And I know that getting all of these people in a room and aligned at the beginning can make it seem like it takes a lot of time to get things started or get off the ground, but it can definitely help mitigate a lot of those challenges that Sunquan was mentioning when you have your siloed teams. So this phase is where the majority of your research happens. So it's important to build in time to share and analyze that data. So schedule some face time to review your findings together. each team has a unique perspective. So this is really where that magic can happen, where you can get together, put your heads together and discover those deeper insights and connections that you might not be able to see if you're just looking in your siloed team. So the second phase is ideation. So this is really when the thing that you are creating is starting to be defined with a content strategy and a wireframe. So this is a great spot to build in a formal internal review period, just to make sure that everyone is still aligned and on the same page before you're getting too far into the next stage, which Sun Quan will walk us through.
Absolutely. And, as you go into visual design, it can be a very common in like a waterfall scenario that you might want to just really focus on polishing the visuals. You've kind of gotten all these goals in place, but it's really important that at this point, you still continue to have these open lines of communication and check back in with the teams that created the strategy and also the folks that will be implementing things or tracking the performance, because a lot of the issues that can come up are, start at that final visual design level. And as you move into the implementation phase, ideally the development team has already been briefed on the wires and the measurement teams had a chance to point out any compatibility things that we need to account for or any alterations or adjustments that the visual design team could make to make the measurement process a little more compatible with the designs. And ideally by then, the development team and measurement team can also continue to check back with each of these teams to make any calls or any unexpected changes that come up without just having to make a guess, give a best guess on, okay, I guess I'll make this button this way, or okay, I think we're just going to scratch this measurement strategy because I can't build it. They can talk to you again and you all can come together and have an informed decision on those things.
So digging a bit further into the discovery phase, this is really where a lot of that foundational groundwork is set for the partnership between SEO and UX. And exercises that are included in this phase can include goal setting and audience research, competitor research, and so forth. But it's really important that no matter what exercise is being done in the discovery phase, this is really where SEO and UX teams need to align. And so some key areas where this alignment should happen is for goals and objectives, making sure that all stakeholders are bought in and agree on the objectives and goals set for the project. Also dividing and conquering the research plan so that everyone knows exactly what they're tackling, how they can share insights when they should meet together to share what they've learned and even help improve the research from the other teams. And then scheduling walkthroughs to actually do this sharing of data for qualitative and quantitative data findings. Make sure that everyone is aligned with scheduling and what their expectations are in time for that meeting. While it's really helpful to break out those high-level themes from search data, don't be afraid to give your UX team the raw data either. It's always good to give them those high-level insights, but if they want to dig in and see everything that there is, don't be afraid to send it over.
Yeah, designers are not scared of data. Please give us all the data you have. So the second phase here is ideation. This phase could include developing your collaborative content strategy. And this is when that thing that you're building starts to get its structure. So an optimized content strategy can really be your UX designer's guiding light during wireframing. This can help ensure that your page considers search intent in addition to all the things that we typically look to as UX designers. So we're looking at user motivations, different needs and pain points, but making sure that your layering and the search intent can really round out that experience for the person who is landing on your page. And because this can help create a better user experience overall, it can also naturally lead to more conversions. It's also important to consider some other usability factors that are important to both UX and SEO while creating the content strategy and the wireframe. So this would include minimizing different structural content shifts, having a solid internal linking plan. So making sure that you're thinking through any ripple effects with how you are linking to other pages, thinking about, content cannibalization and things like that. Creating a strong page hierarchy with structured and optimized headings, avoiding any super intrusive interstitials, and then planning for mobile responsiveness early on. And then, of course, always make sure that both SEO and UX teammates are looped into each initiative at the stage in order to ensure that the end product is balancing both the needs of your SEO team and your UX team.
And as you move into the design phase, like we had mentioned, it's key to keep your SEO teams looped in as content is designed and reviewed by stakeholders, revised and finalized. And an important part as well is to remember that a strong visual design does can also keep users engaged and help increase conversion. So it's not just about just a pleasing interface, but it really can be about translating into those goals, meeting those goals. So specifically, a conversion is like when you meet a specific set of goals on the page. Just for anyone who's unfamiliar with that term. And another factor as well with these other usability factors, scannable headers, accessibility. So making sure that, regardless of, that folks, anybody can consume the content regardless of their, of any impairments that they have or any, anything like that. And also mobile responsiveness. So making sure that all of this is still working on all the different devices, which also is another key way that, as a reminder, Google will rank pages based on being mobile friendly. And as you get into the implementation phase of measurement and tracking and development, making sure to continue looping analytics experts and developers back in to ensure that that final content is performant and measurable, considering page speed and load time as part of your analytics tracking, and also making sure that SEOs and SEO practitioners and UX designers both are involved in QA so that you can see those final pages and how they're coded and make sure that it's all working as intended.
So in order to break this down even a little bit further, there are many ways that you can start this process. When we're talking about the page experience update, what we really need to find out is how the site is doing right now. Are there pages that are performing poorly? Are there pages that are performing well? Which ones should we optimize? What's the priority? And there are a lot of tools that already exist that can help you identify these areas of improvement. And some examples of those, and we have links to them in this presentation for you to view later, are the Core Web Vitals tool and Search Console. You can leverage Google's Page Speed Insights tool, or even set up heat mapping software such as Hotjar or Crazy Egg. Like Sunk once said, being in mind of how much that would add to page load times, adding a heat mapping tool like that to the site, but you can leverage that to identify friction points in areas where it doesn't seem like the user experience is necessarily ideal. And you can really loop in the UX team at that point once you have those findings and have which pages do need that assistance and improvement.
Yep. And then on the UX side of things, you can also start with your UX team to approach things from more of a general usability standpoint. So this is where your UX designers can conduct different things like a UX audit or a content audit to help identify different priority pages or site sections that should get improved. So your designers would look to things like general usability and accessibility guidelines. They might do something like a competitive analysis to see how your site is stacking up to competitives and taking a look at even who's ranking in your competitive space, looking at just a different industry research and studies done that are relevant to similar page types or page structures that you're using. And then any additional marketing or audience research if that's available. So this is where some of that fun stuff that Sharon was mentioning, we're looking at things like heat mapping or click maps and stuff like that, just to get additional user data and usability data to help make that recommendation. But like we were mentioning the whole way through, it's still critical to loop in your SEO team into this process. And they can help you define that content structure that is optimized and also addresses search intent, and making sure that there's no other ripple effects with anything on like the tech SEO side, or anything like that with your cross-linking. So either way you start, you'll probably need a method to prioritize the work for implementation. So a ranking matrix is one tool that we've used to help systematically prioritize where to start. So taking a little bit of a closer look at that, your prioritization matrix can be as simple as something like this, but there are definitely multiple ways to prioritize implementation. So in this example, we have a 5-point system that considers 3 main factors. So that includes the seriousness of the usability issue, the number of visitors affected, and the potential impact on revenue. So something that affects almost all of your visitors and has a major impact on the experience would be categorized as a severe issue. And that would probably have a negative impact on your revenue as well. So that would be considered a higher priority than something that might only partially affect usability or has limited visibility across your audience. So finding a matrix that is unique to your business and also works well with your stakeholders and your development team can help break things down into achievable sprints. So there's definitely a lot of cross collaboration and some new processes to figure out. But at the end of the day, when we look at that intersection point, we find that we're really all working towards the same goal. And that goal is just to make the web better for everyone. And with that, I think we could hand things over to Phil for Q&A.
I'm back. Great talk. It's funny because I take notes. I list out my own questions when we do these webinars, just because I have questions, and I always give priority to the questions of the audience, obviously, because this webinar is not for me, even though it should be. There's just some things that stood out that I thought I'd highlight around this. Like the one thing which I love to point out when we have talks with experts like this, is that I feel like at some point in almost every business-oriented conversation folks have, they point out that like alignment of goals across all of your stakeholders is probably the most important thing to achieve. And it's almost like there's some sort of like problem out there in the business world of people don't realize this is the issue. And there's nothing to say about that except that like, boy, that happens all the time, doesn't it? It's like I think that's the biggest challenge that anyone in any design industry have to deal with. So, and not just design, like in any business situation. So, but I'm going to get into our questions. We've got a whole bunch of questions. I can't even count them, but I'm going to go to the first one in the list, and it's by Anonymous, but it has been upvoted by a few folks. So this question is, this process looks great for developing new pages or experiences. Would you apply this process or portions of this process on assessing existing pages? And do you have any best practices for assessing or improving existing pages that you'd like to highlight? And I think this is great because this is sort of one of the reasons why we brought Seer in to work with us on our site. So I don't know if Sharon, you want to run with this first or someone else?
Yeah, I can definitely hop in here. So the tools that I did mention at the end, such as the Core Web Vitals report and Search Console, PageSpeed Insights, those are really great to leverage for existing content on the site. Especially in SEO, a lot of what we do is optimizing existing content. We can still leverage audience research, keyword research during that process, and just loop the UX team in or your designer as you're going through that. You can use those tools to assess how that page is performing. If it does seem like there may be page speed issues or usability issues, that's when you would loop in UX, and you can share the goals of that page with them, get their insights on how to improve it, and really work from there. So, in the ideal world, UX and SEO would always work together. I think most likely it'll be going back to existing content and fixing places where that collaboration didn't happen from the get-go. And I'll open it up to Sungkwan and Denise if they want to add anything there.
I can layer in a little bit on that too. So when we look at new pages, we'll get an SEO outline from our SEO team. But when we're looking at existing pages, we'll often get something called an SEO audit. So this is where they're going through and making content recommendations and restructuring things and reordering and taking things out and just shifting things around, adding new content. So of course, there's going to be ripple effects to the page layout and what that page structure is. And there might even be additional ideas for interactivity or other things that can improve the user experience. So oftentimes that's when we get looped in from our SEO team to take a look at what they're doing and then just brainstorm on ideas to help improve that page experience.
And just to touch on the perspective from the Think side, a lot of times this is also an opportunity for us, our user research teams with our clients to get some really specific changes or updates to test out and work with a narrower audience after, say, like a content strategy or SEO team has had a chance to provide some opportunities. And that's another aspect of this too, is that you can also use this time to have like ongoing iterative research from a qualitative perspective. Another important piece here that a lot of people tend to miss when you're redesigning a site is this is also a really crucial time to check on, how is the measurement on that site built today, and whether, what you're going to update is going to break it. Because even sites that had a really great measurement plan in place, years back, often just break as soon as you change a couple buttons. So that's a perfect time as well to start reaching out to your analytics team, especially for existing content.
Yeah, I think those are great answers, and just having been a witness to how that's worked for existing content for the Think Company redesign work that we've been doing and refinement work we've been doing. Like Denise said, designers love data, and it's just another source of data. So suddenly you're not just getting information on the content performance itself, but designers are having conversations with SEO experts around what they're expecting, the performance metrics are for a specific page, and they can start experimenting with other things like something as simple as moving a CTA or adding another component within that page that doesn't really change the content at all, but it's helping us help that content perform a little bit better. Not only that, but also like I have things that I've created on Think Company's site that now our SEO research is coming back and saying like, hey, here are the keywords you really should be targeting, and here's some suggestions on how to improve that content itself. And so I have an evidence-based editorial input, which I don't think we've had in the past, which is great. Great. Let's move to the next question. I'm actually going to jump to I think Leda Hughes. Let me find her in our list. And Leda, I'm going to unmute you, and if you want to ask your own question, you are now hopefully allowed to speak and live with the team.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yep.
I think mine was about content cannibalization. I just wanted to understand what that meant. I'm a UX designer, so I've been doing a lot of research on my own about SEO, but I'm a newbie.
That's great.
Thank you.
I can hop in there for sure. So content cannibalization is basically just the idea of having two different pages on the site or assets that speak to the same topic or target the same keywords. Ideally, there's just a single resource that talks about a specific topic on the site. So when you do have two separate entities on a domain that have similar topic focuses, it actually can hurt you from a search perspective, where you can see decreased rankings for both of those pages. And if you just merge them together into a more comprehensive single resource, your rankings could actually improve from that.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Hey, Sharon, I noticed there's another one on content shifts, which seemed like another SEO term, if you just wanted to knock that one out.
Yeah, absolutely. So content shifts, what that is, and I'm sure that we've all had this experience in our lives, it's extremely infuriating when it does happen, is when you go to a website and you're going to either enter some information or you're going to click on an element and then something changes on the page where it shifts down. And so all of a sudden you're clicking on the wrong button, or, everything that is on that page just shifts. And so it can happen on the shopping cart where all of a sudden you check out mistakenly because the page itself moves. And that's a horrible experience that Google is now paying attention to and saying, don't do that at all.
Wow, I love hearing that term, and just my obsession over the election over the past 2 weeks and going to multiple news sites. I can tell you that I was the victim of like millions of content shifts.
It's the worst.
Yeah, it's a very frustrating experience. And that I'm going to jump over some of the questions here, like to a core question that I have, and how, like, do we know what Google is looking at to determine whether an audience member or user has a bad experience? Like, I know that's a big loaded question, but is there any kind of like quick overview of what that, what the algorithm's looking for without knowing exactly what the algorithm is doing?
Mm-hmm. There's a combination. So they have like the core web vitals that they look at for this page experience update. That's really looking at the load times, the content shifts, how quickly users can interact with the page before it loads fully. So we've all been on sites where you sit there and you wait for it to load and you can't click on elements, you can't scroll. And so Google's actually measuring that information. So they can tell ahead of time whether or not that page is actually loading efficiently and that users can interact with it. And then the regular page experience, such as HTTPS versus HTTP, so just having your site on a secure domain, mobile friendliness, so the experience on desktop should be exactly the same on mobile. There shouldn't be a different mobile site versus desktop site. No matter what device users are visiting the site on, it should be an equal experience across the board. So they're definitely paying attention to those. And that's not even including the content that's on the site or what you're targeting, but they're really looking at how the site itself performs before they even really look at the content that's on there. Great content will always be number one, but if you can have great content on a site with a great experience, that's even better.
Yeah, that's great. And just a little plug in here, if anyone wants to know a little bit more about how page performance is measured and how these algorithms work that measure page performance, you can go to Think Company's YouTube channel. John Young did a talk on how all of that's calculated. So and what tools you can use to improve that on your own site. So that'd be a great resource for all of you as well. Let me jump over, since we're getting close to the 4 o'clock hour. Again, we're going to go to 4:30 if anybody wants to stick around, but I want to make sure that the folks who've identified themselves have a chance to ask their questions. So John Chin asked a question. John, I've unmuted you now. So if you want to ask your own question, go right ahead.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I asked, I know we mentioned including lots of teams, and I wanted to know how like y'all have your team structured to encourage that collaboration with so many different groups. I'm in an agile environment, but sometimes it's still fairly siloed. When you try to bring in someone who's not part of an agile team, which usually includes like SEO or the business.
That's a great question. I was going to ask the agile question too, if nobody else did, but I'm wondering, if someone wants to jump in and talk about like how do you work through that that need for collaboration in that environment?
I could start with just how I'm set up currently with the pharma client I work with on a measurement and UX focus. So the fortunate thing for us, the big thing that'll really depend is if you're working for a client services organization, or if you're working or like as a vendor, or if you're working on a product team, of course. But for us, we come in, and though our designers and our researchers aren't necessarily part of the product sprints, we might have, unless they're like kind of part of a dedicated team, that's joining with the vendor, or well, no, with the client, I should say. What we do is we kind of have our own ongoing cadence of like quarterly measurement that feeds in, and we work with the people on the client side to be able to talk to the right folks in order to, try and anticipate like when they're going to update the site, and making sure that we have talked to the development team. And fortunately, we have also like the UX and the analytics folks are very closely aligned, since a lot of them are our key stakeholders. And then we reach out to the SEO team that manages some of the different brands every quarter, just to get some updates from them and figure out meetings from there. And it's not ideal, but it's definitely a good start, right? And that's kind of what you'll end up finding in practice is you can achieve some of these goals. It's going to take time to be able to get more of that collaboration in, but you kind of find it where you can and keep reaching out. That's the biggest thing for us as vendors working with a client.
Great.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of that, it sounds really simple, but a kickoff call with your client and your internal team can go a long way. So we've started projects where we're like, oh, we don't need a kickoff call. We know what the project brief is. We know who the players are. And that's a much harder process, like further down the line, than just getting everybody on that call and setting expectations from the start. And even that's where you have your RACI matrix and things like that, where you're defining the responsibilities and people know what they're doing and what their role is on the team working on that project.
Yep.
Double pro tip on that. If you do a re-kickoff call, even if you've worked with the same team for years, you can kind of do like that, like annual retro or annual, or even semi-annual or something like that check-in. So it doesn't have to just be a new team.
Yeah, I've seen that be a very effective method for major retros to re-kick off after a retro once you've compiled all of your learnings. And that way you can sort of get out there and say like, hey, these few times we were able to collaborate, that worked out really well, didn't it? So let's figure out a way that we can, operationalize that. So great. Thank you for the question, John. I'm going to continue to prioritize questions for just folks who called them in. So I'm going to go to Aaron right now, Aaron Highland, who asked a question about discovery. So let me unmute Aaron. Did that work? It did not work. Hold on. There we go. Aaron, you are live with the team now.
All right, you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Hi. Thanks so much, you guys. I'm really enjoying all of this, and I'm getting all the feels, as they say. So I actually had two questions. The first one was about how do you discuss discovery with the clients, right? Is it something that they actually know by that name? I've been trying to push more of discovery from our end, from a sales perspective, as well as from the importance of really making sure we are solving the problem, that we actually identify the problem before we start to solve the problem, that kind of premise. So we've gotten some pushback from clients, and I sometimes think it might be the way the salespeople are tackling it, but sometimes they say they're scoffing at paying us for us to do the research, right? No, we did the research already. Look at this one survey we took, or we know our clients so well, we don't need you to do that. How do you tend to handle that or combat that? If you've encountered it, I should say.
I can jump in here, but I want our expert panelists, if they want to jump in and answer the question first.
Yeah, I can hop in from the SEO side. That problem is not rare at all. I think a lot of people always say no to research because, just like you said, that they've run surveys or they know their customers. At that point, sometimes case studies are really helpful to show examples of insights that you found for other clients that are shocking. And even understanding of just like, if we invested this much money to create an idea and it was wrong, like how much is it worth for you for us to go back from the beginning and do that research. And you can do light research of like leading indicators of like, hey, we validated what you had first, and like we're seeing some inconsistencies, and here's where we want to dig in a little bit further. But Phil, I know we've talked before about it's very similar on your side as well about selling the research overall.
That's
Yeah,
really
it's, I
great.
mean, it's a very common question, something that we encounter all the time. And honestly, like, I think the perspective of going and saying, hey, yeah, we're going to do our own research, and we're not going to accept the work that's already been done, or the thoughts that you have, is like, that's kind of unacceptable. Like if you were having a house designed and the architect said, I don't want to hear how you want the house to work. I don't want to hear what you thought of it. Like that obviously you would not hire that architect. So like what we found to be very successful, definitely what Sharon suggested, and also this notion of we don't want to duplicate the same work that you've done, but we need to look at your research to identify where the gaps are in the questions that we'll have, work with you on that, and make sure that we're doing the right things to fill those gaps.
I think a lot of times it comes down to a financial investment that they either sunk in the wrong place, or that, you know, it's the same thing as we're going to cut out the cost, so let us do the writing. You know, that's another thing that's one of the first things to get redlined. And, you know, we're often pushing back saying, we're going to have to rework that content, right? So maybe you need to just let us be a part of the ideation, the structure, you know. So it's interesting to hear how, you know, it's good to feel that you guys have a shared pain there, but that there's also a way to combat it. And I think talking about, we've done this before, we've heard what you're saying before, but let's show you some evidence on how that went wrong, and point to the dollars if it's really about the dollars.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, the last advice I'll give is that works really well is to say, let's take the research that you've done, and we're going to build a quick and dirty prototype. And then we're going to go out and we're going to test it in front of people, because this is an iterative process. Design is not, you make one decision and go out. And to go back to the architect's example, like architects show you blueprints, then they show you models, then they show you 3D walkthroughs, then they build the house. All along the way, you're making revisions. So let's do the same thing. And what's interesting is a lot of clients, when they sit through that first sort of prototype testing stage that you're doing, or design validation as we call it, they will say, oh my God, I learned so much more now, because now they've got something real in front of them, and clients start to actually want to do more of that type of activity. So it's another strategy to take towards it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We are big on testing at Seer, and I think it's kind of like almost a sneaky way, because when you're testing something, that the whole project is the research. So it's like you are baking in the research while you're designing, and then you get learnings from that project, which is really cool.
Yeah. Great. Well, thanks for the question, Erin. This is a great conversation. I'm going to move on to another attendee. Let's see. We got a question from an anonymous attendee. Oh, wait, you know what? John asked a follow-up question to content cannibalization. If he's still around, I'm going to allow him to talk and ask that. John, why don't you ask your follow-up cannibalization question?
Yeah, so with cannibalization, you know, marketing needs a lot of time. There's landing pages, paid search pages. There's a lot of things that might not be connected to the site index. And I guess, how does user experience and kind of information architecture look at those pages that might be one-offs or for very specific needs?
From SEO, and I'll leave some quad into these for the architecture standpoint, but as long as those landing pages aren't indexed, so like paid landing pages, we can add a no index tag to them. Google's not going to see them, and we don't have to worry about cannibalization from that standpoint. Where we would pay attention is if people can access that content from the navigation or through normal browsing processes through the site. So always being aware of, you know, if this is a dedicated landing page, does it make sense if users get to it from another page that they may land on via organic search? If it is something that is just for paid or just for email, it's perfectly fine to have that live on the site if it's targeting the same content, as long as we just have a no index tag on that.
Good.
Yeah, and from a design oh, sorry.
I was going to say, is there anything to add?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think from a design perspective, you know, like, or from that information architecture perspective, I think the biggest thing is, you know, when you have opportunities to test, you know, another good reason to plug iterative testing is, you know, if you see, you know, get an example of that landing page or that marketing page, you know, are they clearly able to find, you know, if you make that a task to test out, are they able to find that other page or that other content? Or even if you're testing out the information architecture from a more holistic standpoint, you could do stuff like tree testing, which Optimal Workshop is a really great tool for that, where you could see like, well, based on these categories, am I able to, you know, find, you know, is where I put the content matching where users are expecting to see the content, for example.
Yeah, those are great tips too. All right, I'm going to jump to one of the anonymous questions. I forgot to scroll up and I noticed there's a question that has 3 upvotes. So that's pretty high. So this anonymous question is, what about teams that don't have dedicated UX or SEO practitioners? How can practitioners or team leaders be better champions of either UX or SEO without a dedicated role? Kind of putting all of us out of business, but if anybody has any, if anybody has any suggestions, I mean, we're all interacting with organizations that don't have people who are dedicated to our work. So what have you seen work and not work to help make the case for UX and SEO?
I'm going to plug the Seer and Think blogs first. Great resources from agencies that do this day to day. And definitely, you know, we're here to educate people, make the industry a better place. So, you know, there's other agencies that create great content that you can leverage and learn more about UX and SEO overall. From an SEO perspective, Google is a really great place. They have a lot of resources. They announce updates. They tell you what to look for when updates go out. And there also are industry-specific resources that we can actually provide after this if there are like specific blogs that you want to look for or go to for SEO resources, and just a high level understanding so that you can communicate the concepts is really all you need in order to just understand the importance of SEO and why it should be a consideration. But for UX, I'll pass that to Denise since I'm on.
And I think also looking at case studies too can help you prove that value. So looking, like, I know Seer and Think Company both has case studies for both sides of it. So looking where there's proven results for a project and finding, you know, one in your industry or something that's similar to the project you're working on, it can help make that case to either pull in some additional support or even start building a team in-house if you are interested in going that route. But from our side of things, we often will have to interface with our client teams. So there's a lot of like cross-team collaboration that has to go on. So just making sure that you are considering what the other team has and can bring to the table, and, you know, not trying to steamroll like what you want or what you think is right, and making sure that that collaboration, whether it's internal or with your client side, is also happening.
And I'll also add to, sometimes the best thing to do when you don't have the role on the team is teach yourself enough to get started. And even if it means, you know, you manage to get to the point where you're like, okay, I've gotten far enough to know I have no idea what I'm doing. You at least know more about how to ask the right questions. You also might know more about what you need to look for or advocate for in order to get that on your team. So, for example, when I started doing analytics as a UX person, I had no idea what I was doing, but and also didn't, you know, because of the size of the organization I was working with as a client, you know, our team just had to do a lot of work, just even figuring out who owns certain processes and being able to get them in the room. And so even if you're just starting with the pretty bare bones, like, hey, I kind of know how to do UX, I'm going to give this a shot, maybe try a few tests on my own based on these articles that I've learned. You know, you'll at least get to the point where you see where the gaps are, where you might need to bring in some more hired help and professional work later down the line and build a stronger case with your whoever's, you know, managing your hiring, your budgets and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's so true, and that I think that advice jives really well with what Sharon and Denise were saying as well. Like, if you're a practitioner who's neither a UX nor an SEO expert, you can probably get enough knowledge out there from, you know, things like like our blogs or just general knowledge out there to find something and make a small improvement on it, and be able to take that and take it to the, the powers that be and say, look at this small incremental improvement I did with like little or no background in this field. Now imagine what we can do if we hire experts to come in and do that work, or if we dedicate people on our team and go out and find experts in this area to supplement the team. So whether it's through an agency like agencies like ours, or bringing in experts to be full-time members of your team, there's a lot you can do as an individual, just experimenting and showing that there's impact to those things. And I'm gonna there was actually another question around, for those of us who don't know much about either UX or SEO in our current roles, what are your recommendations for getting educated during downtime? I think Sharon and Denise kind of covered that with, that, and when we'll definitely put some resources together for that. So I don't know if we want to spend any more time on that question, but I'm gonna move that question on and go to, do you have any recommendations for showing the basic ROI of better UX and SEO collaboration, maybe to help leaders understand the importance of working together and cross-education? And this is such a loaded question, but I'm wondering if, if any of you have had the opportunity to sort of try to make that ROI argument in any of the work that you've done, specifically around collaboration. Tough question to answer.
Yeah, I haven't done it from SEO, but from an analytics standpoint, we've been able to prove the value out of just keeping an eye on the site every quarter. When you go through a major redesign of a site that's long neglected, a lot of times, that's one of the last things people really get around to doing. But even just showing how, noticing that there's changes, noticing the trends, seeing the impact of where all of your advertising dollars are going and whether they're actually doing something. Like a lot of times, because that stuff all costs money, like I'm paying all this money to get the site promoted, is it actually doing something for me? Is a classic question for any business person, right? So if you frame it in those terms, and seek to, figure out like what ways you can show that, right? Is that like how many people visited, how many people clicked the right button to buy stuff, right? Like it really depends on your product, but if you can focus on just getting those numbers and like keeping track of the numbers over time, and then showing that case from whatever tools you have available, that's the big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're going to start seeing those conversations happen more because of this update. So before, we always thought UX was probably part of the algorithm that Google has, but now we know that it is part of the algorithm and will be in May. And so now it really comes down to like a cost of inaction. So when this rolls out, is it worth not updating your site and involving UX? And then we can see if you lose visibility in search, that's a negative ROI for not considering UX. So while it's tough to understand now, we're certainly going to learn a lot more as this algorithm rolls out and see the value of integrating UX and SEO together.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the search landscape is constantly changing as well. So even since I started at Seer a couple years ago, my role and the way that I integrate with their SEO team has changed. So the first year or so, like we would get a couple projects with SEO, but we would have projects that were just solely UX. And then I would say in the last couple of years, like everything has been integrated. So we are seeing success with that integration piece where we're collaborating on the research. The SEO team is going really deep into the search intent, and then we're helping to build the thing. So we're showing what that structure is, how the interactivity could be, and what that overall user experience could be. So it's kind of bridging the gap between all of the data that the SEO team is gathering and analyzing, and then what your experience is.
Yeah, those are all great answers, and I think that like another element of this is really going back to the same answer around the discovery question, and that is, if you have to make the case for the ROI of collaboration between UX and SEO, then it's a lot easier to make that case if you have found the space to experiment with it and to show how successful it is. And often that success with collaboration is that, people don't believe, they think collaboration takes more time, but actually collaboration often launches things faster. You may not be launching as many things faster, but you'll often see, like, especially if you're managing a backlog, that like things, stick around the backlog for a very long time, or it takes, 2 or 3 releases to get something done. And that's because people are working in silos. So there's a lot of research out there. I think you can find in Harvard Business Review some articles about how, allowing people to collaborate and actually work outside of those silos improves speed to delivery. So.
And especially if you remember any recent train wrecks with any of those examples of the challenges we talked about, right? Had to shoehorn in something, make something that was really not ideal. Calculating out how much time, you had to spend on meetings for that. It's another great way to put a nice, big, scary price tag on not doing that.
Yeah. Aaron asked another question. I'm going to ask it because it's a simple, quick question. How do BAs factor into this collaboration?
My partner is a BA. I could talk about what I hear from what she does, unless you all have BAs at Seer. But, sure. So I'd say that the BAs kind of feel like a lot of times they're that like invisible connective tissue across all of these things. And for us, when we don't have BAs on a team, that officially we kind of all have to assume parts of that role, right? Because they're able to keep track of all the requirements and gather up documentation. And it's like really awesome when you have someone who can do that, because so many times, that's not, if that's not your primary role, it's really easy to put that by the wayside. So I would say when you have a BA, that's just like another X factor that makes all of this a lot more possible, because they can actually maybe consider from start to finish, like, okay, well, in this phase, we need, this information from SEO and UX, and then we need to make these analytics changes and pass that along with, this documentation, right? Like having someone like that who can handle documentation, who can handle requirements gathering is really huge. And many teams maybe have that in a less official capacity, but if you have a BA, I'd say that's awesome for that person to be involved and for them to be fully like aligned and aware of that whole spectrum of what you're trying to do from start to finish.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I mean, I feel like BAs become that sort of centralized node of like they're often the ones who are facilitating all that collaboration. So, something as simple as a requirement that's written, or a user story or whatever it is that they're managing, that could touch SEO and design and analytics and, whatever team members you have. And so they're the ones who are really responsible for going out and making sure that everyone understands it, that they, if they don't have questions, and then they can provide answers, and they can either do it in their own siloed way or be, that hub of collaboration in that role that they're in. Great. Let's see. Another anonymous attendee asked, can you share examples of audience research methods? How often do you engage users at a one-on-one interview level? So I know this is something you're probably all gonna be very excited about talking about, but like what kind of audience research methods have you used, and how do you use them in this pursuit for good UX and SEO? And I don't know who to throw this to first. Let's see, Denise wants to answer the question.
I was going to volunteer Sharon. She does a lot of work on our audience team, but yeah, we will do all different types of different audience research. So it could be anything from an interview with a subject matter expert if we're working on content that is a little bit more technical, or even for general content if it's something that it's a little bit out of our wheelhouse. We'll do things like user surveys a lot. So tools like Hotjar, you can throw up a quick survey or questionnaire right on your site or on specific pages. So there's a little bit of strategy that goes into what questions you're asking and how to write those questions, but that's a super quick way to get some quick insights just using that tool that often we already are using.
Yeah, and I can layer on top of that because sometimes you don't get the opportunity to speak face-to-face with customers. I mean, it's ideal when you can, but it's not always possible. And so you can leverage other sources. There's data that exists online. You can scrape Reddit forums, which we do often at Seer, just seeing what people are talking about, looking at Twitter, and kind of doing that large data analysis grabbing just to see, you know, the language people use, what their common questions are, and then keyword research itself is really a form of audience research when we're looking at what are people searching for, when during the year do they search for it most, are there anything that's trending right now in Google search, and so we can leverage those to also get a better understanding of our audience.
That's great. Sungkwan, anything you want to add to it? I think you might have.
Yeah, and so from the perspective of analytics, if you happen to have logged in users or a login experience, that's a great way to very clearly know like what type of user is coming in if you have like segmentation on your audience there. So any internal analytics that you might have available can be really great to add that insight. And from the perspective of when you do have the ability to talk to folks in person, you know, it could be, you know, a couple, you know, great classic method, of course, is the in-depth interview. If you just have a series of questions to try and understand what people need. If you're trying to understand more about, you know, how do they think about certain pieces of content, or like how do you, you know, mentally organize this stuff, that's a great opportunity for something like a card sort, which is where you have like a bunch of loose cards with ideas or navigation, and then you put them together, ask them to put them together in a navigation, or tree testing, where you have a navigation you've built based on maybe a past card sort or your first guess, and you ask people to say like, well, where would you expect to find the Q&A page or the you know, this type of thing, and they'd have to click and pick that out. So those are a couple good tried and true testing methods to just get a sense for what people are thinking or how they think about stuff.
Yeah. I think just one other thing to throw out there is, you know, if you have the ability to do this, just any kind of A/B testing, which you can do through like really formal A/B testing platforms. But even if you want to compare, you know, some design changes you're making to a page and push it live to one page and compare that page to a page of similar, you know, traffic and design, and see, is it going to perform better? Like you can do all different kinds of tests like that, where that's audience research. You know, like when we talk about audience research, people often think like, oh, we always want to talk to people, but there are many ways that you can, like Sharon said, that you can, you know, form hypotheses and test them out. And if that's what you're doing, then you're doing research. So I'm going to go to, we have two more questions left. One I think I'm going to skip, and I'll explain why in a second. But the second to last question is, as experienced marketers, we're well aware of the importance of SEO and solid UX for our clients. However, we work with a lot of small to mid-sized businesses, and the investment in SEO and long-term SEO engagement is not easy. So what recommendations or language do you share with hesitant clients or prospects? This is essentially about making the business case for SEO. So Sharon or Denise, I'd be interested to hear what kind of strategies you have around that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question for sure. And it is a difficult conversation to have, because SEO is, while it is so prevalent, I don't think a lot of people think about it. I mean, it's always good just to think about Google and people searching. How many times do you search on your phone for an answer? How many times do you find something online? How many times do you purchase something online? People are working really hard to make sure that their product or service is the first thing that you see. That's the way that the world works now. And sometimes it's really easy to take a step back and don't think about SEO or keywords or page speed, and just say, like, if someone is in the market for the product that you sell, do you want to be there? Or do you want your competitor that is investing in SEO to be there first? And it sounds really simple and high level, but that's really how we get to it. And then we can talk about the strategies, and then we can talk about how we get there. But it really comes down to business goals and whether or not you want your company to succeed in organic search or not.
Yeah, I think competitive research is a really good way to show that. And it could be as simple as typing in, something that your business is helping users to do, and then seeing your competitors have that first spot, second spot, third spot, and it's like you're not even on the first page. Like, what is this costing you as a business to not be showing up here? And then how can we improve that, which would be SEO strategy.
Yeah, and just as a shameless plug for hiring an SEO firm, as a UX and technology firm, like we knew enough about SEO to be dangerous, but certainly not to be experts in it. And the reason why we decided to engage with Seer is because we were constantly frustrated with the fact that there's deeper knowledge about SEO that we really need to be educated on. That we could do a little bit, but we couldn't make the big changes that we could when we hired an outside consultant. But also that if you're an organization that doesn't focus on it, then nobody's going to have the time to do the work. Like you're actually hiring someone to come in and be an expert. And I'll say the same thing about UX. Like, you could be a great digital marketing firm, but not have UX professionals like Denise at your digital marketing firm, and that's totally okay. But getting people who know how to do this and have them fully dedicated to it and putting all their mind share into it is incredibly valuable to an organization. And I think that's the thing that you really need to help potential clients and prospects know and understand. It's sort of like the classic, how's that been working out for you lately kind of question, which it's difficult to do that in a client-friendly manner, but sometimes clients need a little bit of tough love when it comes to that. The last question is, what keywords does Think Company target for? Which I feel like is kind of a bit of a proprietary, we're trying to market ourselves question. We are a UX and technology firm. We focus on experience design and service design and content strategy, and as well as on the technology side, strong front-end development organization. So you can imagine the types of keywords that we're looking for in that area. But Sharon's actually worked really hard to help us focus what keywords we want to focus on, and quite frankly, we pay a lot of money for them to do that. So I don't feel like giving that up outright. But there's quite a bit of research you can do on your own to find out what companies like ours are trying to target. So I'm gonna leave it at that. Any parting thoughts from the three of you before we wrap things up? I just put you on the spot because I didn't I didn't tell you I was going to do that, but
Yeah, I think it's growing pains. Like, try it on one project, like loop in UX one time, see how it goes. It's hard to transform the way business works, and that is much harder than it sounds. And our presentation of ways to do it is not just a simple set of slides and things to do. So approach it like an agile process. Like, what can we do now? What quick changes can we make? And then can we revisit it later? And how do we start building in the habits of looping in UX and SEO together? And then it becomes normal instead of this mental block of figuring out how to collaborate between teams. But that's my piece.
that's great. Anyone else want to give any parting words? Sun Quan, you want to dive in?
Sure, yeah, and to build on that, if you are in that phase where you've kind of tried things out here and there little by little, definitely think of it in that form of like, okay, at least you're continuing to reach out. Eventually, you're going to get to the point where, say, if you're in a big company that has a lot of vendors, you might just need to make sure that you're talking to the person that kind of manages the budget and the time and the scope of what they're hiring for, and make sure that that becomes more official. So, after you've started with those like baby steps of talking to people and making that an ongoing thing to reach out to those teams, look for an opportunity to make that an official process that has money behind it as well.
That's great. Any parting words of advice, Denise?
Sure. So I think the fact that Google announced this update is an indication that UX and SEO will probably be merging a lot more in the future. So I would say look to that intersection point being even more prominent moving forward. So like Sharon and Sun Quan were saying, any way that you can start now is a good place to start. So even if it's small incremental changes to your process, or just looping in your one UX designer that you have, or your one SEO, or if you're trying to cross-train yourself, I think any little starts it's a good starting point.
That's great. The great way to close it out, to take a loop us all the way back to the original impetus of this thing. So just to close out on everything, I'm going to share our wrap up slide here, just so everyone remembers. A follow-up email is going to be sent out to everyone with links to everything that Denise, Sharon, and Sun Quan referenced. We posted some of these links in chat, but they're going to come back through the follow-up email. There is a survey that will be in there. We'd love to get your feedback. We try to improve all of our webinars based on that. So we'll be sharing that with Seer so we can all get some information on that. You can get in touch with us through our the contact page on our website. You can get in touch with Seer by emailing what's going on at seerinteractive.com. And just don't forget that we have an upcoming webinar interview with Michael O'Brien from Village Arts coming up on 12/10. And with that, I'd like to thank Sharon and Denise and Sun Quan for their time, and everyone else who stuck around for the webinar.
Thanks, Phil.
Have a great Thursday, everyone.